Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction. And this is The Identity of Deltarune's Knight and Why You're Overthinking It by Vlaze. And this was suggested on my Discord server by Nemo, and recently, I guess it's probably because, chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune are just around the corner, I've been suggested a lot of videos talking about, the identity of the knight and who it could be and why it's Kris and stuff like that. And honestly, I'm holding off judgment on, whether it's actually Kris, because again, we're still rather early into the game. Anything can really be done at this point. And just because Kris themselves were the one that opened the portal for Chapter 3 doesn't prove that they did it, every chapter, or will do it for every chapter. But, with that being said, again, I've watched a lot of videos about people, talking about who the knight might be. So, thinking about, who it could be and why everybody seems to be overthinking it, I'm all for it. So, yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video linked to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 5,000 subscribers, and at the current rate I'm going, that's totally doable, thanks to every single one of you that thinks that subscribing to my channel is worth doing. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Tonight, the roaring night, days to create this world. Reaching its long hand to the sky, it coursed its will to its blade, and made.
Okay, nice intro.
If you've been anywhere near the Deltarune community since either chapter dropped, you'd know that one of the most discussed topics within the fandom has been the Roaring Knight, the assumed main antagonist of the game who's been responsible for opening the dark fountains across Hometown, along with their identity.
I've seen a lot of people use, Undyne in her armor to depict the knight and stuff like that, and wouldn't it be just... Actually, I can't really think. Would it be funny or not if it actually turned out Undyne was the knight all along, and we just weren't given, any, proof or clues to it whatsoever, just because, again, she had armor and Undertale and stuff like that? Talk about a story out of left field.
From what I've seen, though, some of the discussion feels a bit reachy at times. I think some people are expecting some crazy reveal that needs 4D chess analysis to figure out.
Oh god, Big Head Birdly cannot hurt you. Oh god, no.
To me, at least, it makes more sense to analyze it from the angle of what we know regarding Deltarune's overarching story and character arcs. These kind of things don't usually come out of nowhere, and Toby's narratives are no slouch in being well structured and detailed. Given that the next two chapters are set to come out pretty soon, I figured I'd throw my hat into the ring before we're given the next chapter of the story, and, very likely, the answer. I've taken a good look at the story, characters, and evidence from a narrative perspective, and arrived at
What's with the Colonel Sanders Toby Fox here? Where did this come from?
A conclusion. Two candidates, or more aptly, two branches, that I could see the identity of the knight taking.
Yeah, I know all this.
Let's move on to the main event. My main picks for the knight's identity, starting with a candidate that I find slightly less likely.
Oh, that's a nice design.
Mayor Holiday. Or Des. I'll explain. Before anything else, I'll go over exactly who Mayor Holiday is, for anyone unaware. From what we've been given thus far, we know she's Noelle's mom, and the mayor of Hometown. She's responsible for organizing the festival coming up later in the week that's been mentioned by multiple characters. She's noted by Alphys to be single-handedly responsible for effectively eliminating most crime in Hometown, being described as having an icy demeanor and being a general workaholic. We can infer that the mayor's specifically Noelle's mom from dialogue regarding the mayor and Noelle's mom in general. We know that the mayor is Kris's neighbor from dialogue with Alphys, with Noelle's house being right next to Kris's. The Wet-Nosed Bandits said that they were attacked by something merciless when they tried to sneak into that big house over the holidays.
I never thought of the possibility that the thing that the Wet-Nosed Bandits were talking about was Noelle's mother. Oh god, the fact that she might have potentially been, the one that caught them. Oh, okay. Oh no, wait a second. Oh no. So you know how it's basically assumed that, the Holiday family is pretty rich. And then you have, the stoic adult figure, rich, area of power, fights crime. Is Mayor Holiday, is she like hometown's version of Batman? is that like, it's okay, wait a second. I'm just imagining. So, like, we see the knight, like, we get a glimpse of them, like, the armor and stuff like that, like, given how Lightners look in, the Dark Worlds, totally expected. But then you see the same armor in the Light World, and it turns out that Mayor Holiday's, like, outfit didn't change at all. That's just her superhero costume.
With the only big house in hometown being the Holiday Estate. This sort of strict demeanor lines up with what we've heard about both the mayor and Noelle's mom. Rudy mentions that she's rather hard on Noelle, and Noelle mentions that she doesn't like being bothered at work. Similarly, the mayor is described as being hard to get a hold of, that she doesn't like being bothered while she works. She also has a pine tree in the town hall, being described as always having the AC on full blast, lining up with the holidays being associated with winter and the cold.
Yeah.
We've also been given evidence that she's Asgore's landlord, as there's a note within his flower shop reading, "No rent received. Again. Stop giving away flowers, start selling them. You have 1 month. C." What the C in her name stands for is up for debate. My guess is that it's Carol, because come on.
Holiday, yeah.
But other people have posited stuff like Comet, Clarice, or Clara.
I mean, Clarice, just for the root of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer connection, like, I could also see that, but I think Carol is also just makes a lot more sense given the whole Christmas theme of their names.
Either way, we can infer that this is her due to the size of the Holiday residence, meaning that she probably has enough wealth to own multiple properties, along with their previous relations with the Dreamer family I'll get to. If the landlord was somebody who didn't know Asgore personally, chances are they wouldn't tolerate him not paying rent for multiple months and would have already evicted him. The reason to me
why
she makes sense as the knight within the story is due to her having all of the traits and narrative ingredients to be able to fit the story as the knight in a satisfying manner, in a way that's both cohesive and interesting. Let me explain. One of the focal plot threads of Deltarune is that of the Dreamer and Holiday families, and how they grew apart due to the disappearance of December. Its effects have manifested in a good few different ways throughout the story, like Kris and Noelle drifting apart, Asgore losing his job, and what made Kris so afraid of the bunker to begin with. It's underlied several of the character arcs and narratives throughout the story so far, and so it would make sense for the knight to relate to this conflict due to its similar level of importance to the story. Alongside this, she also makes sense as the knight with regard to both motivation and characterization. When December disappeared, Asgore was discharged from his position as police chief, likely due to his failure to find December or ascertain what happened to her. This is likely something only someone of Mayor Holiday's status could do, and given that it was her daughter that Asgore failed to save, she has plenty of motivation to have him fired. This shows Mayor Holiday's intense care for and vested interest in finding December, which relates to a plot that we already know will become more important as the story progresses. Find her. In the Spamton sweepstakes, we were given a page, deltarune.com/des. In it, we were given a sprite of a red guitar, with a cover of Lost Girl playing. The audio file for this is called findher.mp3. This, alongside the dialogue left in the code of the game, heavily implied to be from Des, tells us that she did not die. Rather, she disappeared. The name of the song being Find Her also lets us know that someone wants to find her, and it makes sense that one of the people in the story trying to find her would be Mayor Holiday.
Again, it does make sense. Especially if she was the knight. I mean, ignoring, we don't know how she even found out about, dark worlds in general, or how to create them. A desperate parent, oh, your daughter is missing, but it's not like they're dead or even in the same world. She's been, like, transported to a different dimension entirely. So, I mean, best way of trying to find them would be to potentially open up more portals, more openings into that alternate world to see if she pops up. I mean, and then the whole, the roaring aspect, it could either be, again, she just doesn't know the full prophecy because Rousey doesn't tell anybody these things, or two, she might be just, hey, prophecy be damned, I'm going to find my kid.
We know the nature of December's disappearance likely wasn't conventional, implied to take place near or at the bunker south of hometown, likely being related to the Dark Worlds and Gaster. This is because when standing near the doors, a slowed down version of MUS_smile plays, the same sound that plays when you use your phone in the Dark World and when in the room for Gaster's entry number 17 in Undertale.
It's better by 666%. Yes, it's always the 666. Gaster is confirmed to be the devil.
In Chapter 2, Snowy and Monster Kid's dialogue show that Kris has a fear of the area for one reason or another, with my guess being what happened to December way back when. The unconventional manner of this disappearance mean it would need an unconventional solution. If Des disappeared into the dark, the only place to find her
would be in the dark. Yeah, exactly.
Dark. This gives us one of the things missing from most other Knight candidates in my eyes. Motivation for opening the Dark Fountains to begin with. Wanting to find her daughter, or bring about the roaring as a method of bringing her back, is plenty understandable, lining up with the pieces of characterization we've been given of her. Not to mention the other aspects of Dark Worlds, one of the themes of which has been escapism.
Granted, I mean, like, I had a lot of fun watching, Cammy Boy G's, like, what was it, the multiple knights theory, I'm forgetting what it was called, but, like, there was going to be a different knight who created each chapter, essentially. And I can definitely enjoy the symbolism in that, where, like, the potential creator of each Dark World, and, the whole theme of Dark Worlds kind of embodying escapism is because, the creator of each Dark World created a Dark World because they wanted to escape. I mean, like, what were the other options? There was, like, Burger Pants, Asgore. Oh, I'm gonna have to watch the video again because I can't remember what the other ones after Kris were. And I mean, you can certainly show that, it's seemingly like each time somebody it seemed like each new person that, learns how to create a fountain ends up creating them themselves. I mean, you just get to that whole part of, like, the potential theory as to why Kris, creates the fountain for Chapter 3. It's because, oh, hey, they like being friends with Susie. They know that a main part of their friendship is because going into the Dark World. So, let's try to keep doing that. And then because of that, like with either Asgore or Undyne coming over, then they learn about how to make dark fountains and stuff like that. But the one bad side about that whole set of theories is that, again, like Des and seemingly everything that's been built up about her so far. Granted, I mean, now that I think about it, the vast majority of all of that stuff that's been built up about her has been, outside of the game. And Toby has said that he only counts stuff in the game as explicitly canon. But, either way, a lot of stuff about Des has been, like, teased and like, theorized and stuff like that. So the fact that, like, if you went with the multiple knights theory as it's been talked about by some people, like, Des is seemingly just kind of, like, thrown to the wayside and just kind of forgotten. So, I mean, having somebody like, Mayor Holiday be the knight as a way of, finding her lost daughter. Yeah, that could definitely work.
The fantastical nature of Dark Worlds has let them be an escape from life for the main characters, giving them release from the struggles they face in their day-to-day. Whether it's for Noelle to live in a world where problems are easier to solve, for Birdley to not need to continue life without Noelle, for Susie to have some place she calls home, And for Kris to be special, with the same accolades that their brother has, Mayor Holiday would have plenty she might want to escape from in this regard, plenty she might look to the Dark Worlds to fix. Her daughter is gone, her husband is sick and might not get better, and her only remaining child is left with only her to look after her. Spreading the influence of the Dark Worlds with the Roaring could be, in her mind, the solution she needs. A way to reunite a family, to cure their problems, to make them all happy again. A way to make the dreams of the Dark World a reality. Another piece that makes Mayor Holiday a solid knight candidate to me is the proper build-up that she's been given. Here we have a character we already know plenty about, but we've never actually seen her in the flesh. All we have is bits and pieces from other characters, painting a picture of an icy-willed authority figure with large influence on the town. We hear of her feats as mayor, her dedication to her work, and her cold temperament, but also the troubled home life of a family that she's part of. It's left us to wonder what she might be like outside the sparse details we've been given. It sparks curiosity, setting expectations for who this character might be when we finally see them. Not only that, but similarly, we've been slowly learning about the festival taking place later in the week, the one that she's organizing, one that turns the entire town into a carnival that all the characters seem like they'll be going to. It's been heavily speculated to be the location of one of the final Dark Worlds, or even the Roaring itself, and its build-up alongside the mayor herself leaves us to wonder about them in tandem. The treatment of her and her actions has been similar to the Knight, a character whose influence has driven much of the story, but one we're only left to hear small pieces about. It leads us to wonder who they are and what their motivation is. The teasing of the three almost feels intentionally linked, setting up payoffs for later in the story. It all reminds me of the original Final Fantasy VII, where Sephiroth is built up by dialogue hinting about his existence and history. He's treated very sparingly, leaving his influence to be felt through small teases to intrigue the player and to add to his mystery, before he enters the fold of the main plot by assassinating the villain the player had been fighting until then. The flashback sequence where the player finally gets to see what he looks like is iconic, and his overall slow reveal is part of what makes his character so strong and what gives him such a strong legacy. Hell, the fact that even her name is only hinted at rather than stated in full could lead credence to the idea that it's her if you believe the identity of the Knight is meant to be a sort of mystery, one that'll slowly be uncovered as its story goes on.
You know, I'm just kind of semi-related to the video, but not really. I'm just kind of thinking, like, hopefully, I mean, and you know, this is excusing the slight possibility that, you know, Toby Fox dies before finishing it. But eventually, one day, Deltarune will be complete. Like, the game will be finished, there'll be no more chapters, everything will be data mined, everything will be known. And I really wonder what it will be like for people coming across and discovering the game then. Because, like, so far, this game has existed in one way or another for like almost half a decade at this point. Almost? No, 7. It's existed in some way for 7 years. And yet the game itself isn't even close to being done yet. And over that time, there's been so many theories and just like fandom culture and like memes and all sorts of stuff created from it. And it hasn't even been finished yet. But one day, it will be finished and the fandom will begin to fade. Unless, you know, Deltarune has, you know, the permanent longevity of Undertale, which, you know, thinking about it, probably it will. But at the same time, how will the experience of a new fan of Deltarune be once everything's done and dusted? Again, sorry that had nothing to do with the actual theory, it kind of popped in my head and I had to just vent about it.
Most importantly, though, she actually has a relationship with Kris and Noelle, 2 of the main characters. Like I said,
she's one of their mothers.
The plot threads in Deltarune is the relationship between the Dreamers and Holidays. And this would give 2 of our main characters a direct relationship with the main antagonist, laying the groundwork for both character and plot developments. This is why I have such a hard time believing it would be someone like Papyrus or Alvin, characters that have light connections to our main characters at best, and the plot as a result. Their presence as an antagonist, at least right now, would have a lot less narrative weight, especially as a sort of reveal. Many of these other knight candidates haven't been given a meaningful connection to our characters, to the town, to the conflicts and story we've been given so far. I'm not saying that this couldn't change. We have 5 out of 7 chapters to go to introduce us to so many more ideas, plots, and characters.
Alternate Star
There's
Walkers!
more than enough time for another candidate to be established and elaborated upon more. But at least, as it stands, I don't have much reason to see it be one of them over someone who is stake and built up in the story like Mayor Holiday. Another possible candidate for this line of reasoning is Des, following the same logic I've outlined here.
Okay, I can just imagine it's like, oh, you left me in the Dark World, now I'll make everything Dark Worlds. Ah! How would that even work, though? Like, she's been seemingly missing for literal years. And if she found some way to escape the Dark World back into normal, normal reality, but didn't go home, like, why? Did the Dark World kind of mess her up mentally as well, so she just gets kind of like hiding in the shadows and creating Dark Worlds just for the sake of it? Or, like, why? I see... Well, again, I like the idea. I don't see why that would be the reason. Mayor Holiday has, much more potential reasons to be the knight.
She relates to the main characters and conflicts and has been built up in a similar manner, with her motivation likely being informed by whatever she learned or experienced in the bunker, in the dark. The only thing that makes me hesitate a little bit is what's likely her dialogue in the code and through Spamton, painting the picture of someone who's trapped and asking for help.
I mean, granted, it's not like there's timestamps on that dialogue or anything. That could have been literally just as she fell into the Dark World, now she was trapped for the first time, and then over the course of years potentially found a way out before she was driven mad.
It makes me lean towards the idea that she's not an active participant in the plot just yet, but she still very much has grounds to be. After all, there's so much we have yet to learn regarding her situation. So, to summarize, I find it very likely that the night is a holiday, either the mayor or December herself, due to them relating to the main conflicts of the story, having relevance to our characters, and being built up in narratively satisfying ways.
But you might hear all of this and think that it sounds like relatively standard theory territory. I might be using a bit of a different methodology, but I'm still treading familiar ground in terms of ideation.
Yeah, who's the other one?
That's because it is. Like I said earlier, this was the option I'm leaning towards less. The reason for the title of the video is because I believe the true identity of the knight is...
Kris, of course.
Kris. Yes. Is this surprising? No, it's probably the most obvious answer to the question. But, weirdly enough, it's also the one with the most people arguing against it. Kris ticks pretty much all of the boxes I've mentioned so far. They have an existing stake in the story. They have potential motivations relating to December and the Dark Fountains. They have meaningful connections to the other main characters. It's also been set up pretty decently, too. We learn about the knight in Chapter 1, are given more info about them and their role in Chapter 2, left by Susie to ponder their potential motivations and morals, just before that bombshell at the end of the chapter revealing that it's likely Kris. It just flows really nicely, all things considered, especially from a writing perspective.
But more than just the narrative, Kris has the meta-narrative lining up for them in this regard. Toby Fox's games have featured meta-narratives relating to their statuses as games.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that.
In-universe mechanics in Undertale was a huge plot point, with themes of completionism and the nature of level grinding being themes of the No Mercy route. Deltarune has been set up to be no different in this regard. The player being a separate entity from the character they play as was a bit of a footnote in Undertale, something you figure out only after completing all of the routes. But in Deltarune, much of the game so far has centered around the fact that we and Kris are not the same. They have their own will and choices they want to make, and we have ours. Our control often overrides theirs, with them only being able to truly act on their own by separating themselves from the Red Soul, from us. One facet of Deltarune's meta-narrative thus far has asked, what happens when the player and the player character want different things? Diving deeper and deeper into that, not just by having Kris's lack of control due to our influence be part of the plot, but also by having our very interests in the story conflict. It's poignant grounds for storytelling, and frankly, it's kind of perfect for the kind of meta stories Toby loves to tell. This canon likely will be a huge plot point in Deltarune regardless of whether or not Kris is the knight.
Mm-hmm.
Toby said in an interview with Yoko Shimomura that Kris will play more of a role than just a traditional hero. It's just that Kris being the knight would give a lot of extra room to explore the concept and its implications.
Okay, well, I mean... Okay, so I'm thinking of a couple of things. One, just kind of going back to the beginning of the segment where, like, people are very resistant to, you know, Kris being the knight. Again, like, it's still early days, so anything can be possible. But I guess, like, the part of the reason is, I could imagine would be, one, you know, we're controlling Kris, so we don't want, you know, the person we're controlling to, you know, be the villain. Second, it would also just be, like, how did they find out? How did they discover the ability to create dark fountains and stuff like that? Plus, I mean, there is the whole thing where, like, I could see it potentially as being, you know, kind of like not wanting to feel like you're being unnecessarily handicapped, at least, you know, in this sort of deal. Because, like, currently, like, the only people in universe that know Kris is being controlled, at least that we know of for certain at the moment, is, you know, us and Kris. Oh, and also Spamton as well, but, you know, he's not really, I don't imagine him being, you know, very important further on in the story. But our actual interactions with the story are, like, handicapped when it comes to, you know, actually interacting with the world as opposed to Kris. Like, when we're in control of Kris, yes, we can, you know, have them walk around, interact with objects, but our, you know, the interactions we get to do are very limited by, like, you know, the up to four options we're given. While Kris, being an actual person in this world, is able to actually interact with it like, you know, a person. And they're able to remove us, stick us away, and do stuff without us knowing it, so that we don't know what we're going to be getting into in the future. And I can potentially see that, even if it's just subconsciously, being seen as, like, being almost unfair or something like that.
Alongside all of this, the evidence for Kris Knight is just overwhelming, to be frank. To the point that if Kris wasn't the knight, I would have so many questions about what some of these details might mean otherwise.
2 words: red herring.
Here's what I mean. We're given pretty clear tells that the creation of the Dark Fountain at the end of Chapter 2 is something that Kris has done before. They had to know about Dark Worlds and how to create them before the story began. They showed levels of knowledge consistent with what the knight has done. Case in point, when you wake up in Chapter 2, you can check the TV in the house. In Chapter 1, it was unplugged. But, interestingly enough, in Chapter 2, it's plugged in. This is especially interesting because we only learn about how dark fountains are made near the end of Chapter 2, and on a first playthrough, we're left to believe that Kris learned it here too. But if Kris plugged the TV in beforehand, it means they likely planned the Chapter 3 Dark Worlds ahead of time. It'd also mean that they have experience both creating and orchestrating Dark Worlds before, since they had to make sure to turn the TV on and open the door before opening the fountain, which means they know these things will affect the Dark World itself. It shows a degree of planning for the Dark World, something we see with regard to previous chapters and their respective Dark Fountains.
I mean, again, I like playing devil's advocate a lot of the time in these theories. So, but I mean, you know, if you remember back, you know, remember, Queen had the recording of, you know, the knight opening the portal. You'd assume potentially that the recording of the, you know, portal opening included the knight setting up, you know, everything to actually get ready. So maybe Kris basically did some monkey see, monkey do and just basically mimicked them. Or, you know, through the power of deduction kind of figured out, like, oh, what was going on and how things interacted with things in the light world and the dark world.
With the Chapter 2 Dark Fountain as an example, the laptop in the library is open, specifically saying that somebody left it on. All of the computers are turned on, and the closet full of electronics is opened. For the Classroom Dark Fountain, many of the games and other toys were purposefully strewn about, creating a pathway that's in line with a linear RPG. Sham saying that the knight put the king and his son into power could very well imply the same sort of organization, that Kris removed cards from the deck and put them away ahead of time, so that King would be the boss of the Dark World. This sort of orchestration of previous Dark Worlds lines up very clearly with what Kris is doing for Chapter 3, because we wouldn't know where Kris's experience with setting up and creating dark fountains like this would come from unless they were responsible for the previous 2 fountains. This is what I meant by the title of the video, by the way. These specific details, to me at least, coalesce into a pretty clear, if not obvious indicator that the one opening the fountains in Hometown is Kris, and that they know way more than they let on. Disregarding it is to ignore some pretty clear details provided in the game. However, like I mentioned earlier, Kris Knight is the theory that's likely had the most pushback out of any Knight candidate, with lots of arguments being made against the possibility. But if I'm being frank, most of the arguments fall a bit short. Let me run through most of them real quick to
Okay, actually, no, I did potentially think of another one. Maybe this might be just me thinking of it right now, but maybe another reason people push back against it would be just because, like, it seems a little too obvious. Like, the idea of, like, oh, the person you're playing as, especially the person that we've been shown has, you know, a will of their own and we're controlling them against their will, is actually the evil villain of the story and has been, you know, causing all the troubles all along when we're not in control. So the idea that it's that simple, potentially, might not be that, you know, entertaining to some people.
show you what I mean. Kris would have had to break into the library at night. There's no evidence of a break-in, and they wouldn't be able to move that far without the soul. While we only see them move slowly on screen, Kris is still capable of quicker movement with the soul out, as they were able to slash Toriel's tires without her being able to see who it was. We also don't know if the library would actually be locked at night. Crime in the town is practically non-existent due to the mayor, and another public building, the school, was unlocked when nobody was working the place after hours, meaning that something similar could likely apply to the library. Or, you know, Kris could just be able to pick locks. They're pretty capable off-screen, and being able to discreetly break into a library is something I wouldn't put past them. Noelle and Birdley had their books out when the fountain is sealed. The fountain would have had to be made with them already in the room. Except, neither of them have backpacks. If they were to walk into a room with a fountain in it, like when Kris and Susie did in Chapter 1, the books would inevitably be put down or dropped in some way once the two fell inside the dark fountain. The books aren't open, so we don't actually know if they were studying already. Alongside this, it's perfectly natural that they would go into the room. They'd just assume it was dark and try to find a light switch, the same way Kris and Susie did with the closet.
Okay, a couple of things. One, the whole thing with the books is that it's not like, if they just fell in, you'd expect, you know, the books to be scattered. Like, it maybe not far from either, you know, Noelle or Birdley, but, like, the books are set in neat piles on the desks like they were put down there first. We saw with, you know, how Kris and Susie entered the Dark World, they plummeted, and I very much see, you know, the books, even if they, you know, you're limited to, you know, the actual, you know, size of, you know, the computer lab, the books would still be potentially scattered across the room. Plus, I mean, you know, the whole thing about just walking into the room and, you know, trying to find a light switch. I mean, I don't know about you, but the vast majority of places I've been to, I've seen, you know, the light switches being, like, you know, right by the entrance door. Like the light switch to my room and basically every room in my house and basically every house I've ever been in has been, like, right next to the door or one of the doors if it has multiple. Now, I can totally believe, you know, Susie, you know, going into the closet and just thinking it was, you know, dark, because as we've seen, especially in the beginning, Susie's not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I can totally imagine her just walking into the room, trying to find a light switch anywhere it could possibly be, and then, you know, Kris kind of walked in because, one, we were controlling them, and two, also, you know, Susie was kind of forcing us. even with Birdley only pretending to be as smart as he actually is, I highly doubt that either him nor Noelle would just like blindly walk into a room trying to find the light switch, when in all likelihood the light switch is literally just to the left or the right of the door frame. For me, I mean, again, like Birdley kind of pretending to be smart, he still is, you know, intelligent. For me, it just makes much more sense that the both of them were kind of, you know, they were in the room already sitting down when the fountain kind of started, and that's, you know, how they ended up there. Noelle and Birdley never have any, like, memory of actually walking into the room and falling. They never say anything about that. They just were there. And when the Dark Fountain is destroyed and the Dark World dissipates, they're asleep at the desks. Which, again, makes me think that, you know, they were already there. Because they were awake in the Dark World. But they were asleep in the Light World? Because we've seen, you know, in Chapter 1, it's not like Kris and Susie were asleep when, you know, the Card Kingdom, you know, was destroyed. They were fully awake. Why would that be different for Birdley and Noelle?
It'd definitely be ominous, sure, but I doubt someone as headstrong as Birdley would turn away from his studies just because the computer lab was kind of spooky. Queen said that the Cyberworld Dark Fountain was made that day. Given that time passes when Kris is in bed, when they wake up it very well could be the next day. If Kris made the fountain at, say, 2 in the morning, it would still technically be the same day as when Birdley and Noelle go to the library. The closet said a lot.
Okay. But, okay, so again, like, and I may be kind of just imagining here, but, like, just thinking about it, like, when you're in the Dark World, it's shown that, you know, a lot of people use the computer labs in the library. Like, it seems almost everybody has, like, some sort of search history that, you know, Queen was pulling from and stuff like that when she had those, like, little rooms. So, I find it hard to believe that during the entire day, nobody else at all walked into the library and walked into the computer lab and didn't end up in the Dark World. I have a hard time believing that if it was created, you know, in the middle of the night or very, very early morning, that throughout the entire day until the end of school, when, you know, Kris and Susie leave, that nobody else besides Noelle and Birdley ever set foot inside that computer lab.
A large person could fit inside, which implies the knight made the fountain in there. While possible, the text doesn't necessarily imply anything about the knight. In all likelihood, it was just some flavor text contextualizing the Giga Queen fight and how its scale translated to the Light World. It also gives us the extra detail of where Birdley was put in the weird route. Additionally, the video of the knight creating the fountain the Swatchlings were watching was likely from Queen's laptop camera, which wasn't facing the closet, though the argument could absolutely be made that there was a camera in the closet, as it was said to be full of electronics. Closet night is possible, sure, but it's by no means indisputable. The king says it's the knight's will to kill the Delta Warriors, which Kris is in. Except we don't actually know if the king was given direct orders. Like Queen in Chapter 2, King could very well just be operating on his assumptions about the knight. If the knight gifted him this glorious dark fountain and put specifically him in power over the other kings, it's pretty natural to assume that he would think that the same knight would want him to kill anyone who would try and steal the fountain.
Again, we're getting of a whole territory of, oh, did the knight ever actually set foot in the Dark Worlds? Which, again, you know, that was a whole video on its own I did a reaction to. But, I mean, you know, with Queen, she specifically says, oh, she only watched she watched the creation and stuff like that. I mean, granted, it might be just because, you know, the king is in fact a playing card, so that's why but it does seem like the knight was very much, like, much more involved with, like, the actual, like, internal politics of the Card Kingdom compared to Cyber City. Again, that might be just me reading too much into some things.
But wouldn't the Darkners recognize Kris? Not necessarily. Queen was only operating based on her assumptions about the knight's actions. We have no proof that she ever actually met them, or that any of the Darkners did, in fact. The ability to influence a dark world before its creation means that the knight wouldn't have to actually enter any of the dark worlds in the first place. Queen said that the knight's hand was long, and Kris was too short to reach the arcade controls in Chapter 2. While a fair observation, I'd be lying if it didn't sound a bit nitpicky. Yes, Kris is too short to reach the arcade game, but so would pretty much anyone else. Have you seen how big Queen is compared to every other character in Deltarune and Undertale? Pretty much no other character could actually do that. To be frank, I don't think not having the same reach as someone who utterly dwarfs Papyrus would necessarily mean that their hand is short.
Okay, well, I mean, admittedly, that could also just be, if I step over the line to the Kris side for the second, that could also just be, perspective. I mean, given that, all the Darkners are made from objects, most of which are, smaller than, a Lightner, I guess it would make sense to call the Knight's hand long, at least in comparison to, the average size of an actual Darkner.
But why would Kris want to cause the roaring? This is something we would learn about during the story, obviously. The fact that the knight is referred to as the Roaring Knight by Queen, who likely hasn't even met them, means that it's probably part of some prophecy or what have you. This is, admittedly, the strongest piece of evidence against Kris Knight in my eyes, as given the sequences where Ralsei talks to Kris outside the view of the player, alongside the fact that Ralsei said that he only just now detected the Dark Fountain when he rushed over to help Kris and Susie in Chapter 2. It means that he likely would have had to be in on Kris's knighthood and be acting as a sort of accomplice.
Yeah.
Which might sound weird, given the fact that Ralsei was so worried about the roaring happening in the first place. But again, these are motivations and reasoning that could be elaborated on as the story moves forward.
Yeah, again, as I said, we're still very early in the story. I mean, again, 2/7 of the way in, and we're going to be getting 2 more in about a month. So, at this point, it's we're still very early days. We don't, figuratively, technically speaking, we don't have very much proof for anything, really.
Perhaps it needs to occur in a specific spot or in a specific way for the prophecy to occur as it's supposed to, that Ralsei wants to abide by, or simply there's more to all of this than Ralsei lets on. The scrapped animated opening for the game would have shown the Delta Warriors running upstairs towards the knight. Wouldn't that be impossible if Kris was also the knight? Not necessarily. It can often be a common trope for a character to face themselves, or personifying 2 halves of themselves as different people.
Yeah?
Openings like these are often abstract, lending themselves well to symbolism. And this aspect could work very well for Kris being the knight, given the split of when we're controlling them and when they're acting on their own by forcing us out. And lastly, it gets rid of the mystery too early, or it would be boring. A common objection I see to Kris being the knight is that it would be too simple of an answer.
Literally, what did I say earlier?
It's supposed to be a big mystery, a whodunit, one we still don't have the answer to. So, to these people, the end of Chapter 2 implying that Kris is the knight is too obvious, too easy. It's supposed to be 4D chess after all, why would it be spoiled so early? But that's the thing, it doesn't necessarily need to be a big mystery. It's putting the cart before the horse, assuming that to function well in the narrative, the knight must be a mystery. Not just to the other characters, but specifically to us, the player. But is that necessary?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I could definitely see that, because I mean, there is a whole subgenre of, detective stories and stuff like that. They aren't called whodunits, they're called they're called how catch'ems. The best example of that is, Columbo, if you've ever seen any of those old detective shows. At the beginning of literally every episode of Columbo, you see the person doing the crime and how they went about it. At that point, the story is, not, who did the crime and why. It's, how is this person going to get caught by Columbo? And, what things didn't they hide properly enough that Columbo was going to find? I mean, as a sort of similar thing, I mean, they kind of do the same, something similar in, Knives Out, where for a part of the story, it's, you're not forgetting in the first movie what the woman's name is that you follow, but like a good portion of the beginning of the story is just following her along and seeing like how the detective, like what clues he's seeing, what things like how she's trying to hide things, and like what he's picking up on, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I mean, I definitely could see like an aspect of the game going forward being like, oh, we're seeing Kris do this sort of stuff, but they're hiding their tracks, and then it's up to us to try to like find clues and kind of like show the others what's actually going on or something like that. I mean, how that would actually work, I don't know.
The story very well could direct its focus onto the ramifications of Kris being the knight, and how that impacts their friends, their town, and us, rather than just us discovering the identity of the knight. Us being the only ones who actually know that Kris is the knight would add a whole extra layer to the story. We might know the identity of the knight, but we only operate under the pretenses the game gives us. We can't sound the alarm to the other characters. Quite importantly, all of this isn't even to say that Kris would be an outright villain in this scenario. There's the idea that, because the knight is assumed to be a villain, Kris would inevitably be recharacterized as evil. But I think that's doing both the concept and Toby's writing a huge disservice. Just because their will opposes ours doesn't necessarily mean that they're acting as the knight out of malice. After all, in the Goner Maker sequence, Gaster refers to Kris as someone very, very wonderful, the same way he does for Susie and Noelle. The question of why they're doing what they are and why they're orchestrating the Dark Worlds in that way, that could be the mystery left for the player. Toby's narratives are full of moral grayness and complexity. Even a literal, soulless, emotionless killer like Flowey is given reasons for why they do what they do, and a complex story that the player is left to empathize with.
Yeah, the reason being, you know, they were brought back from the dead, and the process of being brought back from the dead made them into a literal psychopath.
Given that Kris is the main character of the game, I don't doubt that they would be afforded the same emotional complexity with their storyline, even if they're acting against the party in secret. A mystery doesn't necessarily need to have its answer hidden from the viewer for it to still be a great part of the story. Oftentimes, it's just as satisfying watching the other characters put the pieces together. Overall,
Actually, you know, as a fun thing, I remember years ago I found this. Well, it was a comic, and then somebody made a comic dub of it, like this, like little. I think it was like 3 comic strips of like, what if Columbo was actually like in Deltarune, and he was like following Kris around to try to figure out during the investigation. It just kept popping up, and he had like the glowing eye like sands. Oh, it was absolutely beautiful, which was actually really funny because in real life the actor who played Columbo, I'm forgetting his name, actually had a glass eye, so one of them was fake. So if that kind of held over to him being a monster, only one of them would actually glow.
I think that viewing Kris Knight as a sort of letdown from some big mystery is, again, doing the story that Toby might be trying to tell here a huge disservice, especially given how much depth could be mined from the concept. In the end, I'm left to wonder, why do people think this question will have such a complex answer? I think, to an extent, it's the way for future chapters getting to people, and I can't exactly blame them. There's a potent desire, when given a sizable weight for new content, for the answer to a question to be more complicated than it actually is, that there's one big central mystery we still need to figure out. Don't get me wrong, the game does treat it like one, at least for the first 2 chapters. It
definitely does.
We're left to wonder who this character might be, and all things considered, it makes for a pretty interesting mystery.
Yeah, and then you say that, and then, like, the next, like, 4 chapters that get released, the knight never gets brought up again until chapter 7.
It's understandable to want it to still be one, too. To not want the potential answer we've been given to be true, because it might mean we won't have that specific mystery to mull over to keep us busy. Even if Kris makes more sense than most of the candidates on a lot of different levels, for some people that could just be hard to accept. There's lots of questions I'm eager to have answered when future chapters come out, and the ending of this chapter really does still lead us to wonder if Kris is the knight. But I'm unsure if this is meant to be the giant mystery some in the fandom hype it up to be. None of this is to say that it's a bad thing to want it to be a mystery or to keep theorizing about it in the most wild ways possible. even in ways that don't even make sense, like positing Elphys or Pizza Pants as the ultimate villain.
Yeah.
Theorizing is a huge part of fandom, and it's fun seeing all these different ideas. It's not to say that any of these ideas would be bad writing, or that it would be bad for them to be the case. We're 2/7 through the story. Topu would have plenty of time to work his magic and turn any potential character into a narratively deep fan favorite. I
Yeah?
have faith that he could make literally any character work in the role. Again, I don't think it's impossible that another character is the knight. Like I said, if it's someone other than Kris, I'm fairly confident it's a holiday. It's an angle that could still work wonderfully for the story and is still worth speculating on. It's more so that other times, I feel that plenty of theories miss the forest for the trees, focusing on small details and scraps rather than doing narrative and thematic analysis. The former is incredibly fun, don't get me wrong, but I think that the latter is criminally underrated as a form of theorization within fandom. So many details can be recontextualized when you change the angle that you're seeing it from, and inform a lot of ideas you could see happening or your interpretation of the story so far. If Kris is the knight, that makes so many fascinating ideas, plot threads, and dynamics open up for the story. I think
Yeah, it
theorizing
definitely
about
does.
that is just as worthwhile as questioning the identity of the knight itself. If there's any takeaway I want there to be from this, it's that looking at different levels of a work when coming up with ideas or theories like this is wonderful, and that you should try it more. And hey, sometimes it might just get you closer to the truth than you.
Yeah, I know, the passage of time makes it feel like makes it feel otherwise, but I mean, technically speaking, we're still very early into the story of Deltarune. Anything could be possible. Can I see what they're talking about it potentially being Kris? Yes. Do I want it to be Kris? No. Do I want it to be? Do I want it to be, someone different? Somebody new? Yeah. Will I be angry if it's not? No. So yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So we definitely have to wait and see, if we, actually get any more clues. Well, I mean, we probably will. I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
I know you didn't. I know you made Noelle do it. You've got us all fooled for days, but it didn't add up. Kris wouldn't act like this. It couldn't be them. And yet, the culprit was in front of us all along.